The early morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Fort Adams, mess hall, casting long streaks of light across the worn linoleum floor. The hum of soldiers, chatter mixed with the clatter of trays and cutlery, creating a rhythm familiar to everyone stationed at the base. New recruits nervously from table to table, trying to navigate the crowded hall without spilling their trays or bumping into the veterans who had learned long ago how to maneuver with precision. Among them was Private Carter, barely 2 weeks into boot camp, her uniform still stiff and her boots scuffed from endless drills. Every step felt awkward, every glance weighed with self-consciousness. Stray wobbled dangerously as she stepped past a group of laughing soldiers. Her nerves frayed and her mind raced with doubts. Don't trip. Don't drop anything. Don't embarrass yourself. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. A tall, calm woman carrying her own breakfast tray walked into her path, a neutral expression on her face as she scanned the room. Distracted by the chatter and her own fear of making a misstep, misjudged the distance. Her shoulder slammed into the woman's side with an unintentional shove. The tray tipped, sending eggs and toast sliding across the floor like a small, chaotic landslide. The general steadied herself, her fork clattering to the ground, and looked down at the mess. The hall fell silent. Heads turned, conversations froze mid-word, soldiers blinked, some too stunned to move, whispers erupted like sparks in dry grass. "Who is she?" one whispered. "Did you see that?" exclaimed another. A few soldiers instinctively stepped forward, ready to scold or intervene. His heart pounded against her, her face burned with embarrassment, her hands trembling as she fumbled to scoop up the fallen food. I'm so sorry," she stammered, words tumbling out like rocks rolling down a hill. The woman straightened, brushing crumbs from her jacket with a calm precision that seemed almost rehearsed. She did not raise her voice. She did not scold. She simply studied with sharp, calculating eyes as though measuring not the shove, but the girl's very soul. Interesting, she thought, her gaze piercing yet unreadable. Panic surged. She had heard rumors about strict commanding officers, about generals who demanded respect to the point of fear. But this woman was different, calm, observant. And yet had no idea that she was staring into the eyes of Brigadier General, one of the most decorated and respected officers in the United States Army, who had chosen today to walk among her soldiers incognito, assessing morale, discipline, and character. I didn't see you there," stammered, backing away slightly. Her tray, now half empty, trembled in her hands. Her legs felt weak, her mind reeling with 1,000 what-ifs. What if she'd just ruined her career? What if this woman reported her? Punishments in boot camp were harsh, and rumors of strict generals circulated like wildfire. She was trapped in the weight of her mistake, unable to imagine redemption. Around them, soldiers exchanged glances. Some masked amusement with feigned indifference, others whispered about the unusual calm of the woman in the center of the chaos. No one knew her rank, no one dared intervene. Breathing quickened, a mixture of shame and panic flooding her senses. Every eye in the room seemed to bore into her, magnifying the moment, stretching it like a rubber band. And yet the general said nothing, not a word, not a sharp glance, only silence heavy with potential judgment. In that quiet, realized the enormity of the moment. She had inadvertently crossed paths with someone extraordinary, someone whose presence commanded respect not through fear but through calm authority. Time seemed suspended as struggled to compose herself. The smell of scrambled eggs lingered in the air. Soldiers, whispers formed a low hum. And through it all, the general's eyes never left her, assessing, calculating, waiting. Little did know this accidental shove had set into motion a chain of events that would challenge her, teach her, and ultimately transform her understanding of discipline, leadership, and courage. The first battle of boot camp, it seemed, was not against drills or exercises, but against her own fear in the of places. The mess hall. The clatter of trays resumed slowly, but the tension in the mess hall lingered like a stubborn fog. Soldiers whispered in low tones, exchanging glances that betrayed both curiosity and caution. Some speculated about the woman who had been shoved, her posture, her composure, the unmistakable air of authority that didn't need uniforms or insignias to command respect. Others shrugged, unwilling to risk guessing, but their eyes followed wherever she went. His hands shook as she set her tray down at a table far from the incident. Her palms were clammy, her chest tight, and every heartbeat thudded in her ears. She had survived boot camp for only 2 weeks, yet it already felt like she had committed the gravest offense imaginable. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends. Across the room, the woman unknown to Brigadier General continued to stand upright, scanning quietly. She didn't speak, didn't signal for anyone to intervene, didn't scold the nervous recruit. Instead, she observed. The general's gaze lingered on trembling hands, her unsteady posture, and the shame in her eyes. The general had seen countless recruits stumble, falter, and fail, but there was something intriguing in this one, a raw, unpolished nerve that might yet become resilience. His fellow recruits noticed her distress. Private Daniels, a tall soldier with a sympathetic grin, leaned over and whispered, "Don't worry, she probably won't say anything, just keep your head down." Nodded numbly, her face still flushed. She tried to eat, but the eggs on her tray tasted like cardboard. Every time she glanced up, she caught a hint of the general's eyes, not stern, not angry, just watching. Meanwhile, gossip began to ripple outward. Soldiers who had witnessed the shove whispered in hushed tones, "Who is she? Why didn't she yell? Wasn't she some kind of officer?" Some imagined worst-case scenarios, harsh punishments, extra duty, or even demotion. Others argued that the general's calmness was a sign of something deeper, perhaps a test in disguise. Every soldier had a theory, yet no one dared approach the woman. Consumed by anxiety, replayed the incident over and over. Every movement, every misstep, every ounce of clumsiness haunted her. She had been shoved into the spotlight without intending to, and now it seemed that all eyes, including those of the mysterious woman, were locked onto her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly human. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this, she thought, swallowing a lump of panic. The general, however, had no intention of humiliating publicly. She had spent years cultivating discipline, leadership, and mentorship. She knew that fear alone seldom inspired improvement. Instead, she sought to understand how responded under stress. Would she crumble, hide, or rise to the challenge? Observing from a quiet distance, she noted quick glances, the attempts to compose herself, the slight tremor in her voice as she apologized to nearby soldiers who had narrowly avoided the spilled breakfast. As the morning wore on, his initial panic began to evolve into a strange combination of dread and determination. She realized that she couldn't afford to let this moment define her. If she survived, she would need to learn from it, grow stronger, and prove that she belonged. She tried to focus on her next tasks, folding uniforms, carrying trays, following orders, but the memory of the shove lingered like a shadow. By mid-morning, a subtle rhythm returned to the mess hall. Soldiers moved with routine efficiency, yet remained acutely aware of the general's silent observation. She had no idea that her accidental shove had sparked interest rather than ire. In fact, Brigadier General began quietly noting reactions, assessing her courage, humility, and potential. The general's decision was already forming. Rather than punishing this clumsy, anxious recruit, she would guide her. Didn't know it yet, but the day's incident had planted a seed. One small shove, one moment of panic, would become the starting point of a journey that would test her limits, teach her resilience, and eventually reveal the profound impact of leadership built on observation, patience, and understanding. By the time she left the mess hall, his mind was a storm of fear, regret, and cautious determination. She would never forget the woman she had shoved. She didn't yet know that this stranger, calm and unyielding, would come to play a pivotal role in shaping not only her military career, but her understanding of courage, respect, and responsibility. The day stretched on like a relentless drill. Carter moved through the base with a heightened awareness that made every step feel heavier than usual. Her boots clunked against the concrete floor as she performed routine duties, but each movement was shadowed by the memory of the mess hall incident. Every glance at passing soldiers or instructors felt like judgment, a silent reminder of her embarrassing shove. Sweat prickled along her neck, not from exertion, but from anxiety. Everyone saw it. Everyone knows. This is the end of my career before it even begins, she thought, fighting the urge to shrink into herself. During the morning drills, nerves made coordination difficult. She stumbled over the cadence during marching exercises, her rifle slightly off-kilter as she fell behind. Other recruits whispered, half in annoyance, half in sympathy, while the drill sergeant's sharp commands cut through the air. His face flushed as she tried to match the movements of her peers, each misstep reminding her of the incident with the mysterious woman in the mess hall. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if every soldier around her could read her inner panic. Even during brief breaks, found no peace. She sat at the edge of the training field, hands gripping her water bottle like a lifeline. Her thoughts circled endlessly, a storm of guilt and fear. What if she reports me? What if my mistakes cost me everything? Her stomach churned and she swallowed hard, trying to calm herself. Fellow recruits noticed her distraction but hesitated to approach. His anxiety radiated in a way that made her seem unapproachable. To her, the woman she had shoved, the Brigadier General, moved through the base like a quiet shadow. She observed at every moment, noting reactions in drills, interactions with peers, and responses to stress. The general had a keen eye, trained over decades of service, and she saw the subtle glimmers of determination beneath nervous exterior. There was fear, yes, but also resilience, a willingness to push forward even when mistakes piled up. The general's gaze lingered not with judgment, but with curiosity. This was a recruit worth guiding. By mid-morning was assigned to help organize supplies in the storage bay. She moved quickly, but her hands shook, knocking over a stack of boxed rations. She froze, heart hammering. Several soldiers shot glances her way, half amused, half sympathetic. She muttered apologies, red-faced, and scrambled to fix the mess. The general, observing from a distance, noted its reaction. She did not hide or blame others. She accepted responsibility, even amidst panic, a small but crucial mark of integrity and character. Lunch arrived, but could barely eat. Her tray trembled as she picked up her fork, memories of the spilled eggs and toast flooding back. Every sound in the mess hall, the scrape of chairs, the murmur of voices, felt amplified. When a fellow recruit nudged her gently, whispering encouragement, nodded, trying to appear composed. Inside, she was a whirlwind of worry and self-recrimination. She couldn't stop replaying the incident, imagining the general's eyes boring into her, noting every flaw. The afternoon brought obstacle courses and physical training, each exercise testing endurance and focus. Stumbled repeatedly, but she refused to quit. Each fall, each mistake, reminded her of the mess hall incident and fueled a determination she didn't know she possessed. She began to understand that fear could be a tool, a motivator rather than a chain. Through it all, the general watched silently, recording mental notes. How handled stress, how she recovered from mistakes, and how her persistence, her apparent clumsiness. This observation was not for punishment, it was for understanding. Every stumble, every misstep was a small lesson in resilience, humility, and courage. By the time evening fell and the day's drills ended, was exhausted, both physically and mentally. Her body ached, her uniform was stained with sweat, and yet beneath the anxiety, a faint spark of pride began to grow. She had survived a day filled with judgment, chaos, and her own self-doubt, and still she had kept moving forward. Little did she know, the woman she had shoved in the mess hall had seen every moment, every struggle, every flicker of determination. This quiet observation was the first step in a mentorship that would challenge limits, test her courage, and ultimately transform her understanding of discipline, respect, and leadership. Brigadier General moved through the base with a quiet authority that demanded neither attention nor applause. Her uniform was impeccable, her demeanor calm, and her eyes sharp, scanning every corner for details invisible to ordinary observers. Yet today, she walked incognito, blending among soldiers, observing behaviors, morale, and discipline with a meticulous, almost surgical precision. Among the countless faces, one stood out, not for skill, not for confidence, but for raw human vulnerability. That face belonged to Private Carter, the recruit who had shoved her in the mess hall that morning. Years of experience had taught that moments like these, small accidents, brief lapses, revealed far more about a person than flawless drills ever could. She had watched stumble through exercises, flinch under scrutiny, and yet rise each time she fell. Most recruits would have crumbled under the weight of embarrassment, anxiety, or fear, but persisted. That persistence, subtle and unpolished, was far more telling than perfection. It spoke of courage and potential, the kind that could be molded into leadership with the right guidance. The general recalled her own early days as a soldier. She remembered the fear, the mistakes, the moments when she had wanted to shrink away from authority. She had been clumsy, impatient, and unsure, yet those who had guided her, mentors who saw potential rather than flaws, had shaped her into the leader she became. That memory strengthened her resolve, would need the same careful mentorship, but first, she had to prove herself under observation. She noted every detail of the recruit's behavior, how his eyes darted nervously during drills, how her hands shook when lifting supplies, how she apologized earnestly for every small mistake. There was humility there, yes, but also a quiet determination that most recruits lacked, understood that fear could either paralyze or fuel action. Fear, though raw, had begun to fuel action, a crucial first step in the transformation from a nervous recruit into a competent soldier. Throughout the day, the general moved like a shadow. She helped another recruit struggling with a heavy box of rations, spoke a few words of encouragement to a young soldier fumbling with drill formations, and quietly observed from a distance. Every note in her mind was part of a larger calculation. Could handle stress? Could she learn from mistakes? Could she grow without crumbling under pressure? These were the questions that would determine whether the young recruit was worth mentoring personally. At one point, she paused near the training field, watching tackle an obstacle course. She had fallen twice already, scraping her palms and muddying her uniform, but each time she had gotten back up without complaint. The general's sharp eyes saw the micro-details. The way's jaw tightened in determination, the brief hesitation before she lunged forward again, and the tiny nod she gave herself when she succeeded at a particularly difficult obstacle. It was these moments, unobserved by most others, that revealed character. Smiled faintly to herself. Most recruits only saw punishment or drills, despite panic and clumsiness, showed potential in the crucible of fear. That was exactly what I'd hoped to see, raw talent that could be shaped into discipline and courage. She made a mental note to approach personally, not with reprimand, not with authority, but with guidance. This would not be public and it would not be humiliating. It would be mentorship, subtle and firm, designed to challenge while preserving her confidence. The day ended with exhausted, her uniform dirt-streaked and her energy spent. But too, that exhaustion was a sign of effort, not failure. Each stumble, each anxious glance, each small victory was part of a story she was quietly writing, one of growth, potential, and resilience. By observing carefully, she could craft a path for that would teach more than drills ever could. As evening descended over Fort Adams, the general walked toward the barracks, reflecting on the day. Had unknowingly walked into a test of character. She had failed in appearance, yet she had passed in spirit. Knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, and with careful guidance she would shape the nervous young recruit into someone far more than she could imagine. The foundation was laid. The mentorship would begin soon. The sun had climbed high over Fort Adams, casting sharp shadows across the training grounds. Carter's uniform was soaked with sweat, streaked with mud, and clinging to her in uncomfortable patches. Every muscle in her body ached from the relentless drills and obstacle courses, yet she refused to quit. Each stumble, each misstep felt amplified by the mess hall incident earlier in the week. I can't fail. Not now. Not ever in front of her again, she thought, glancing nervously at the general, who observed silently from the edge of the field. The obstacle course was a gauntlet of physical and mental tests, climbing walls, balancing on narrow beams, leaping over muddy ditches, and crawling under low-hanging wires. Had already fallen twice, scraping her palms and twisting her ankles slightly on the mud-soaked terrain. Each time she wanted to collapse to sit down and let someone else continue. But a spark of stubbornness refused to die. She pushed forward, grit overriding pain, humiliation, and self-doubt. Every muscle trembled, every breath burned, but she fought on, driven by the memory of the mess hall and the quiet, watchful eyes of the woman she had shoved. Her fellow recruits moved alongside her with varying degrees of skill and composure. Some were naturally athletic, bounding through the obstacles effortlessly, their confidence radiating. Others stumbled but few recovered with her persistence. A few soldiers exchanged whispered comments about her determination, half impressed, half skeptical. Cheeks flushed, but she focused on her own rhythm. Every misstep was a lesson, every fall a reminder that resilience mattered more than perfection. From the sidelines, the general noted every detail. Brigadier General had seen thousands of soldiers in her career, but's response to adversity intrigued her. She didn't merely react with panic, she adapted. After every stumble, she took a deep breath, assessed the obstacle, and attacked it again with cautious precision. The general recognized a subtle intelligence at work. The recruit was learning in real time, not just physically but mentally, absorbing lessons from both success and failure. The mid-morning sun bore down mercilessly, and its exhaustion was nearly complete. Her legs felt like lead, her arms trembled, and yet she refused to stop. She fell for a third time while attempting a particularly challenging wall climb. Mud streaked her face, and her uniform clung uncomfortably, but she gasped for breath and climbed again, muscles screaming in protest. The general's eyes softened slightly, nodding the unrelenting perseverance. This was the mark of potential, she realized, the raw material that could be shaped into leadership. Later was assigned to carry heavy packs across the field, navigating narrow paths with precision. Her hands blistered, her shoulders burned, but each careful step reinforced a lesson she had been learning unconsciously. Mistakes were not failure, they were opportunities to grow. She glanced fleetingly at the general, who nodded subtly, as if acknowledging the effort without fanfare. That simple gesture strengthens resolve, and she pushed herself harder, determined not to falter again. Even during small breaks, practiced the drills in her mind, reviewing each obstacle, visualizing success, and correcting errors before attempting them again. Sweat and grime coated her, but determination glimmered in her eyes. The general watched, impressed not only by her resilience but also by her willingness to reflect and adapt, a rare combination for someone so new to the rigors of military life. By the end of the day, her uniform was ruined, her muscles sore, and her energy nearly depleted. Yet she felt something she hadn't expected, a growing sense of accomplishment. She had faced physical exhaustion, humiliation, and anxiety, and still she had pressed forward. The general's silent observation had guided her in ways didn't yet realize. Every misstep, every fall, every struggle was part of a lesson that went beyond physical training. It was about perseverance, courage, and the quiet strength that forms the backbone of every soldier. As the recruits filed back to the barracks, walked with aching limbs but a steady mind. Somewhere in the shadows, the general followed, noting the day's performance, mentally planning the next step in this quiet mentorship. Had no idea that every challenge she faced today had been carefully observed, and every stumble had strengthened not just her body but her character. The real training, mental, emotional, and moral, was only just beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training grounds, the air thick with the scent of sweat, mud, and determination. Carter, exhausted yet alert, trudged toward the next exercise. Her muscles ached from hours of relentless drills, her uniform clung to her skin, and the bruises and scrapes from the obstacle course made each movement painful. But despite the fatigue, she carried herself with a quiet determination she hadn't noticed before, a flicker of resilience born from repeated failures and small victories. As she approached the balance beams for another round of training, a voice cut through the hum of exertion. "Watch your footing, Private." It was calm, firm, but not scolding. Froze, instinctively glancing toward the source. There she was, the woman from the mess hall, standing at the edge of the field. Something in the tone made his chest tight. She didn't yet know that this was Brigadier General, one of the most respected leaders in the army. The general walked toward her, movements controlled and deliberate. "You're struggling with balance, but it's not just your legs," she said, nodding toward the narrow beam. "It's your focus. Confidence comes from knowing where to place your energy." His heart raced. Is she criticizing me? Am I about to fail even worse? She thought. But there was no harshness, no judgment, only observation and guidance. "Relax your shoulders," the general instructed, demonstrating a small adjustment. "Breathe, visualize each step. Don't focus on the fear of falling, focus on the next move." Tried to imitate the posture, mimicking the fluid precision of the instructor's movements. Her first attempt wobbled and she nearly toppled over, but the general's calm voice encouraged her. Again, this time with control. Took a deep breath and tried once more. Slowly, carefully, she inched across the beam, focusing on each foot placement, each shift of weight. Sweat poured down her face, but for the first time that day, she felt a sense of clarity. The general's presence was steady, supportive, and unyielding all at once, a paradox that found both intimidating and inspiring. After several repetitions, the general nodded. "Better, you're learning faster than most recruits who have been here months." His mouth went dry. "Me? Faster than them?" The words felt impossible, and yet the quiet approval from the woman she had once embarrassed sent a rush of confidence through her. A small spark of pride flickered, fragile but undeniable. They continued through exercises together, footwork drills, tactical maneuvers, and even simulated combat exercises. Each time faltered, the general offered a subtle correction, a tip, or a word of encouragement. She didn't yell, she didn't humiliate, she guided. Every lesson was precise, deliberate, and designed to build both skill and self-assurance. Between drills, the general spoke quietly, almost conversationally. "Mistakes are not failures, they're information. Each time you stumble, you learn something new. Observe, adapt, and keep moving forward." Absorbed the words like a sponge, realizing that every error in the past days, the mess hall incident, the stumbles on the obstacle course, the awkward missteps, was part of the process. For the first time, felt a growing sense of respect, admiration, and trust. This woman, calm yet commanding, was not just correcting her physically, she was shaping her mind. Leadership, realized, was more than orders or authority. It was patience, guidance, and the ability to see potential where others saw failure. By the end of the afternoon, exhaustion was complete, but her spirit was strengthened. She had learned more in these few hours than she could have imagined. And though she still didn't know the instructor's true rank, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and an even deeper drive to improve. The general watched silently as gathered her gear. She had seen enough today to know that this recruit had resilience, courage, and the raw material to become a capable soldier. All that remained was careful guidance, time, and trust. His journey was only beginning, and the mentorship had just begun to unfold. The morning sun glinted off the polished brass insignias as the base prepared for its weekly inspection ceremony. Soldiers lined up in perfect formation, boots gleaming, rifles at the ready. Carter stood among them, uniform crisp despite the mud and sweat of previous training. Her muscles ached, Her hands trembled slightly with nerves, but her mind was sharper than ever. Today, she told herself, she would prove her worth, not just to the drill sergeants, but to the mysterious woman who had guided her through her most grueling days. She scanned the crowd, instinctively looking for the quiet figure she had trained with in secret. The general was nowhere in plain view. His heart sank momentarily, had she imagined all of it. But then a hush fell over the formation as the commanding officer stepped forward to begin the ceremony. Soldiers straightened, eyes forward, anticipating announcements, awards, and inspections. Felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, but this time it was tempered by confidence she hadn't known she possessed. She had survived the mess hall, the drills, and the mentorship. It was her moment to demonstrate growth. The commanding officer began with the usual protocol, commending top-performing soldiers, emphasizing discipline, and reviewing base achievements. Then came the moment that made his heart stop. The officer gestured toward a distinguished figure entering the hall, someone moving with undeniable authority. Froze. The face was familiar. The woman from the mess hall, the one who had guided her, corrected her, and watched her stumble countless times. Gasps and murmurs spread through the ranks. Soldiers whispered, recognizing the sharp eyes, the poised posture, the unmistakable aura of a high-ranking officer. His jaw dropped as realization hit. The woman she had accidentally shoved, the calm mentor who had transformed her panic into growth, was Brigadier General herself. His cheeks flamed crimson. She had been training under one of the most respected generals in the U.S. Army, oblivious to the rank, the reputation, the weight of the position. Every memory of missteps and corrections surged in her mind. How had she not known? How had she ever thought herself capable in front of this woman? And yet the general's presence was not judgmental. She radiated pride, calm approval, and quiet satisfaction. The commanding officer acknowledged the general, who stepped forward to address the formation. Her gaze swept over the soldiers, finally landing on. The general's eyes softened slightly, a faint smile appearing at the corners of her lips. Then came the public acknowledgement. "This young soldier," she said, voice firm but warm, "has demonstrated resilience, determination, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. Despite initial struggles, she has shown remarkable growth in both skill and character. She embodies the values we hold most dear." His breath caught, her knees felt weak, and her mind struggled to keep pace with the enormity of the moment. Soldiers around her whispered in awe, glancing at her with newfound respect. Felt a strange mix of embarrassment, pride, and disbelief. The person she had feared and revered for days was now publicly praising her, turning humiliation into triumph. The general stepped closer, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder. "You've done well," she said quietly so only could hear. "Remember this lesson: resilience is forged in adversity and character is revealed in how you respond to mistakes." Nodded, swallowing back tears of relief and pride. Every stumble, every scrape, every anxious thought had led to this moment. She had not just survived, she had grown. As the ceremony continued, walked taller, chest forward, no longer weighed down by fear or doubt. Her journey had shifted from panic to perseverance, from embarrassment to achievement. In the quiet glance she exchanged with the general, she understood something profound. Leadership was not about rank alone. It was about guidance, trust, and seeing potential where others only saw error. By the end of the ceremony, felt transformed. The general's mentorship had turned a simple shove in the mess hall into a defining moment in her career. What had begun as a mistake had evolved into growth, recognition, and the first true understanding of what it meant to serve and lead with integrity. The sun was low over Fort Adams, casting long golden streaks across the parade ground as Carter returned to the barracks. Her uniform, though no longer spotless, carried the weight of achievement rather than failure. Her muscles ached, and small cuts from the obstacle course reminded her of the journey she had endured, but inside, a quiet strength had taken root. For the first time, felt what it truly meant to grow beyond fear, beyond mistakes, and beyond self-doubt. She walked through the mess hall where it all had begun, this same place that had been the stage for her most mortifying moment. The tables were bustling with soldiers, laughter, and the familiar hum of breakfast chatter. Normally, this place would have made her nervous. Every movement, every glance, every tray clumsily carried would have been a potential disaster. But now, moved with confidence, her head held high, her hands steady as she carried her tray through the crowd. She even offered guidance to a new recruit, struggling to navigate the crowded room, gently pointing the way and lending a reassuring word. It was a small act, but realized how much had changed in her since the mess hall incident. The accidental shove, the panic, the relentless drills, it had all become part of her transformation. She remembered the quiet eyes of Brigadier General, the precise corrections, the subtle guidance that had shaped her every stumble into learning. The general's mentorship had not been about authority or intimidation. It had been about seeing potential where others only saw failure, about teaching her to trust herself, and about showing her that resilience was built one small step at a time. As sat to eat, she noticed the general quietly observing from across the room. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and a small, knowing smile passed between them. Felt gratitude, respect, and a hint of awe. The woman who had once been the object of her panic had become her guide, her mentor, and her inspiration. And yet there was humility in both of them, an unspoken understanding that this journey was ongoing. Lessons learned, but not fully mastered. Growth achieved, but not final. Later that evening, as prepared for bed, she reflected on the past days. She thought about every stumble on the obstacle course, every trembling hand, every anxious thought, and realized that each one had contributed to her growth. She had feared judgment, humiliation, and failure, yet through perseverance and guidance she had discovered her own strength. Her confidence was no longer fragile. It was tempered by experience, forged in adversity, and by mentorship. Understood that her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more tests, more moments of doubt. But she no longer feared them as she once had. Now she welcomed them as opportunities to grow, to learn, and to prove herself, not just to others, but to herself. And she knew that Brigadier General would continue to watch, guiding quietly, ensuring that each lesson was learned with both skill and character. The next morning returned to the training grounds with renewed determination. She noticed a new recruit struggling with a heavy pack, hesitating at the obstacle course. Without thinking, stepped forward and offered guidance just as her mentor had done for her. "Watch your footing here," she said calmly. "Take it one step at a time. You've got this." The recruit looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes, but then nodded, trusting her words. Smiled softly, realizing the cycle of mentorship was beginning anew. In that moment, understood the profound truth of leadership. It was not measured by rank, medals, or authority alone. True leadership was about guidance, patience, trust, and the ability to see potential even when mistakes threatened to overshadow it. Her journey, from the clumsy recruit who had shoved a general in the mess hall to the confident soldier mentoring another, was a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of guidance. As the sun rose over Fort Adams, felt ready for whatever came next. Her past mistakes were no longer weights on her shoulders. They were stepping stones to her future. And with the memory of her mentor's quiet strength guiding her, she knew she could face any challenge, confident in her growth and ready to inspire others along the way.